Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me, and welcome to my 37 CD music collection of band and related projects for Queensryche. The band itself formed in 1980 and have released 16 studio albums to date. The other 19 albums that I have here come from things like live albums, compilations, a bootleg, solo albums, side projects, and many other things. But before we dive into that, if you are new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with Queensryche 37 CD music collection. So obviously, we've got a lot to go through. Let's jump right into it. We're going to go through all the Queensryche band releases first, and the first one up being the self-titled EP from 1983. Debut release from the band, certified gold when it ultimately when it came out. Only 4 songs were on this one, although the reissue that I have here added 10 live tracks to it, so it's got 14 tracks now. It plays more like an album than it did when it came out as just an EP. And the next one that we've got is The Warning from 1984. This one here, first full-length studio album released by the band, certified gold. And this is where I started to take note of the band with the song Take Hold of the Flame. I think a lot of people started to pick up on them from that one there. And then the next one as well, Rage for Order from 1986. Second studio album by the band. It was also certified gold, and it had Walk in the Shadows on it. I will remember a number of tracks on here that started to get some radio play for the band, so they were starting to really move up. But it was really their third studio album that everyone took notice on. Operation Mindcrime, 1988, certified platinum in the end. Funny thing is, they didn't tour for this. They made a little mini movie of singles and videos and stuff like that for it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that one later. All right, their fourth studio album, though, is Where They Broke Big, Empire from 1990. This one here ultimately certified triple platinum. It had 6 singles released at the time. Huge songs, Best I Can, Jet City Woman, Another Rainy Night, Empire, Silent Lucidity, and Anybody Listening. But in my opinion, the album from start to finish is just amazing. I can listen to that thing all day and all night. It's so good. And then they followed this up with a live album, Operation LIVEcrime from 1991. The album itself is Operation Mindcrime played in its entirety, and it was recorded on the Building Empires tour. So remember I said they didn't tour for Operation Mindcrime. So when they toured for the Empire album, they played it in its entirety, which was kind of an interesting thing to do. You're promoting Empire, and that album is just breaking big, and instead you're playing another album in its entirety. But it worked for the band, and it was something unique at the time too. And Operation Mindcrime had really grown in stature over the year or two between its release and the Empire album. So in the end, it all worked out for them. All right, next up we've got Promised Land from 1994, 5th studio album, ultimately certified platinum, which is really cool. And that 1994, of course, was when grunge and alternative rock and everything was going. And have a band of the 80s like this to still be doing that successful was a pretty big deal. I remember a lot of people talking about it at the time too, about how that album itself had been certified platinum. All right, then I've got this one here, which is a promotional only release called Road to the Promised Land. Came out in 1990, and it was a compilation that was released to promote the tour. So it was given out to radio stations, not sold in stores, stuff like that. And just a kind of a cool release. And since they didn't have a greatest hits at that point, this compilation here, which spanned all of their albums, was a cool thing to get. This next one here is a bootleg called Tokyo 1995, double live album. Very, very good quality. They performed a lot of the stuff off Promised Land, and it was a unique time for the band and a unique sound for the band, and so they haven't performed a lot of that since, so I wanted to have that in my collection to represent that time period, as I'm a big fan of the Promised Land album. All right, the next one up being Here in the Now Frontier from 1997, 6th studio album, last on the EMI label. Also last to feature original guitarist Chris DeGarmo. And lucky enough, I got to meet these guys, both Geoff Tate and Chris DeGarmo, at the time they did an in-store signing. So got to have that one signed, and a great memory for me. Now, Another promo release that came out at the same time was this one, Here in the Now Frontier Tour, also 1997. Promo only release, compilation again to promote the tour. This one though featured 2 unreleased tracks at the time. It had Silent Lucidity, an MTV Unplugged version, and Scarborough Fair, which was a B-side, but first time appearing on a Queensryche full-length album, even though this was a compilation. But if you were able to get a hold of these like I was at that time, that was pretty cool to have a couple, unreleased songs on a Queensryche album. All right, next up is their 7th studio album called Q2K from 1999. This one here was their first one on Atlantic Records. It was also the first album to feature Kelly Gray, their new guitar player. Now, he had made his name producing like Candlebox and some other bands of that, alternative rock era. But interestingly, he actually played for an early version of Queensryche when they were called Myth. And that was the Geoff Tate version of the band before they joined up with the rest of the guys and really formed Queensryche. But, he comes from that same world. And even though he went on to do production and the band Queensryche itself went on to do what they're doing, eventually he makes his way into the fold as a member in 1999. I just thought that was a really cool thing to have taken place. All right, then we got a greatest hits from Queensryche in 2000. It's a career-spanning release. This one picks up everything through the EMI era, so it doesn't have anything from that one Atlantic album, Q2K. But it features 2 previously unreleased tracks, Chasing Blue Sky, which was an outtake from the Here and the Now Frontier album, and Someone Else, full band version. Now that song is the last song on the Promised Land album, but it's just Geoff Tate and a piano. This is a full band performance, which they recorded at the time, ultimately just deciding to go with that piano performance. All right, the next one being a live album, Live Evolution from 2001, double live album. Cool thing was they broke the music down into 4 suites of similar style music, and that's how it was presented to the crowd, so done a little differently instead of just being like a greatest hits live performance kind of thing. All right, next up is Tribe from 2003, 8th studio album from the band. Former guitarist Chris DeGarmo joined up on this one here, and he took part in the writing sessions and recording for the album, and he was supposed to rejoin and tour with the band. He even did a photo shoot with them, but ultimately pulled out at the last moment. This is also the first album that features their new guitarist, Mike Stone. Now, he was only listed as an additional player on this album, but he does become a full member for touring and albums going forward. And then we did get a live album after that. We got Art of Live from 2004. This album, though, focused very heavily on the new songs itself. It turned a lot of fans off. There is a middle section of this, though, where they do, I think, 4 acoustic songs. So it's kind of cool and unique to get that out of that release, even though it focused on the newer songs. And then the band attempted to do a return to form, album in itself, doing Operation Mindcrime 2 in 2006, building on the legacy of Operation Mindcrime, continuing that story, 9th studio album, although it sounds very little in style to the original Operation Mindcrime. It was much more of that modern day sound that we knew or that they had been doing. Ronnie James Dio, though, plays the part of Dr. X. He sings on it, which is cool. Pamela Moore, who played Sweet Sister Mary, returned on this one here, doing more vocals for that album. Now, at the same time, though, because they were promoting the Operation Mindcrime 2 release, they released this, a remastered deluxe edition of the album itself in 2006, box set, 2 CD, 1 DVD edition, and it featured the original album, but then it also featured an unreleased live show. And this is where they put out, finally, Video Mindcrime on DVD. This is that recording of music videos that tells the story, a little short movie, 25 to 30 minutes long, that they made about Operation Mindcrime. So when they didn't tour, instead, they made that mini movie, and that's one of the things that helped push that along. So on the tour, though, while they were supporting Operation Mindcrime 2, they performed both Mindcrime 1 and 2 in their entirety live in concert, and we got a live album from it, Mindcrime at the Moor, 2007. So double album, both albums performed in their entirety. Album itself, I can't say is all that interesting to listen to, but the live DVD of it, seeing it, because they had actors on stage acting it out. So that was really cool. And then we got another compilation called Sign of the Times, the best of from 2007, 2 CD compilation. The cool thing was the first disc had kind of duplicated some of the stuff from the greatest hits. It did pick some deeper cuts on it as well. Spanned a little bit more. It had some tracks from the Q2K. But the second disc on it, which was a sort of deluxe edition of this, rarities and outtakes. Full album worth of rarities and outtakes. So if you can ever get a hold of the 2-disc edition, it's totally worth it in that regard. And then in the same year, they released a covers album called Tate Cover, and they did tracks on here from Pink Floyd, Queen, Black Sabbath, and many more. And I gotta say, Queensryche did it right. They really interpreted these songs in the Queensryche style, making this album here as interesting to listen to as any of their studio albums' original material. It was also the last album to feature guitarist Mike Stone. The next album, American Soldier, came out in 2009, and the 11th studio album was concept album, recorded as a quartet. So interesting, you know, they had done the 2 concept albums, Operation Mindcrime 1, continued it in Operation Mindcrime 2, but this was an entirely unique concept album. Didn't do nearly as well, though, as Operation Mindcrime, but still interesting that they gave it a shot there. All right, and then Dedicated to Chaos came out in 2011, 12th studio album from the band. It focused on rhythm, at least that's how it was described, allowing Scott Rockenfeld, the drummer, and Eddie Jackson, the bassist, to really shine and to add to the compositions. It was the first album to feature new guitarist Parker Lundgren, and final album to feature Geoff Tate, the original vocalist for the band. And so at this point, Queensryche just completely falls apart, and we start splintering and getting into different things here. And first up is Queensryche Frequency Unknown 2013, 13th studio album, but it only features Geoff Tate. This is his version of the band. Now, he brought back into the fold here Kelly Gray on guitar, remember, former Queensryche member. Randy Gain, who's the keyboardist who's been playing on lots of Queensryche albums, also an early member of Queensryche before they were signed. They add in Rudy Sarzo on bass from Quiet Riot and Whitesnake, Robert Sarzo, his brother, on guitar from the band Hurricane, and Simon Wright on drums from AC/DC. So really cool lineup on it. A lot of people didn't like this album. I have to say the mix was really muddy on it, but I think the songs were quite strong. Next up we get Queensryche's self-titled release, 2013, 14th studio album from the band, and first to feature new lead vocalist Todd La Torre. So this was the remaining guys in Queensryche, not Geoff Tate, their version of the band. Last to feature original drummer Scott Rockenfeld, and it was more of a return to form of their 80s metal sound than previous Queensryche albums had been, so fans really took to this over the Geoff Tate version of it, and ultimately they went through a lawsuit where Geoff Tate gave up the name and the main guys hung onto it. So the albums going forward with the Queensryche name are without Geoff Tate. And that takes us to the next one, Condition Human, 2015, 15th studio album, recorded as a 4-piece. Drums are handled by Todd La Torre on this. So that was an interesting thing. A lot of people didn't know that even though he's an amazing vocalist, he was first a drummer. And then the next Queensryche album, and the latest one so far, The Verdict from 2019, 16th studio album, also recorded as a 4-piece with Todd playing drums on it. Now, they're currently in the studio recording a brand new album. They've got Casey Grillo on drums joining in. Scott Rockenfeld is saying he is still a member of the band. He has started his own website for the group. So you've really got these 3 factions of Queensryche going at it at this point. It's going to be interesting to see how this all unfolds. But now, we're going to move into the solo and side projects. First up being Geoff Tate, his self-titled release in 2002, debut studio album for him. This one here was really different than Queensryche. It had a more new wave electronica feel to it. It was almost as though Geoff Tate was performing music in the style of Depeche Mode or The Cure or something like that. I really like the album, but it is just so different than Queensryche. Not surprised that it just didn't really do anything for him. Next up is his next solo album, Kings and Thieves from 2012, so second solo album, released a decade later from the first one there, but this one here returns them to the sound that we know and love, that Queensryche style, and a very good album at that. And so remember, Geoff Tate had to give up the name Queensryche, or at least he chose to. What he got was the name Operation Mindcrime and the rights to that album and performing it in its entirety and all those things. So he built a band around it, calling them Operation Mindcrime. This one here, called The Key, came out in 2015. Debut studio album for this band at this point. It's a concept album, first in a trilogy. As I mentioned, features Geoff Tate in here and many of those musicians that performed on his version of the Queensryche Frequency Unknown album and the supporting tours and stuff like that. The next one we've got, also Operation Mindcrime, called Resurrection, released a year later, 2016. Second studio album, continuing the concept, and second in the trilogy. These albums here really are a return to form in terms of the Queensryche sound. Much more of that Empire and Promised Land style sound. If you like that late 80s, early 90s Queensryche sound, this version of the band in the name Operation Mindcrime, that's where it's at, and I do recommend it. And the third one in the trilogy, called The New Reality, 2017. Very good stuff. I definitely recommend the first album is the best, the second album next, and the third album is my least favorite, but all really good stuff. Haven't heard anything from them in the last 4 years. It seems like Geoff Tate has put it on hold and moved on to other stuff as we've started to get these. Sweet Oblivion, featuring Geoff Tate, self-titled release from 2019, debut studio album. It's on the Frontiers label. It's one of those project things where they put the band together, they grab the cool guitar player and the good singer and feature it around that sort of a thing. But it has a real 80s vibe to it, so it's very cool. I do like what they're doing so far with it, and hope they continue to do more. And they've got a second release here, this one called Relentless, and 2021, so it just came out this year. And it's really good to see that they're doing this. I don't know what's going to happen next with Geoff Tate, but that's the latest project from him. Then we've got some other stuff from the other guys here, going all the way back to 2001, so 20 years ago. Spies for Darwin, debut EP, supergroup. If you don't know about this band, check out who's in this. It's Chris DeGarmo on guitar, of course coming from Queensryche, Vinny Dombrowski on vocals coming from Sponge, Mike Inez on bass from Alice in Chains, and of course Ozzy Osbourne, and Sean Kinney on drums from Alice in Chains. You've got all these Seattle guys coming together, some grunge, some metal, some in between the alt rock thing. Really good album. It's a mix of all their sounds. Obviously with Vinny on vocals, it sounds a lot like Sponge, but you can hear those elements of Queensryche in it from DeGarmo playing on it. It's definitely like the 1997 album, Here in the Now Frontier. Next up is another really good one that's got some Queensryche elements to it. Slave to the System, self-titled release. This one here is the 2006 release, the official release of it, but they had put it out on their website a year or two earlier. So the band had been kicking around. They had this recorded. This one here features, again, supergroup, Kelly Gray on guitar and vocals, coming from Queensryche, Scott Rockenfeld on drums, also from Queensryche, Roman Glick on bass, Brother Kane and eventually Jackal, and Damon Johnson on guitar and vocals from Brother Kane. So quite the lineup here. But again, if you like the Q2K and Here in the Now Frontier style albums, this is a good one to get. It's definitely in that vein. All right, and the final album in my 37 CD collection goes to Soulbender, their self-titled release, debut studio album, and of course it features Michael Wilton on guitar from Queensryche. And there you go. That is my Queensryche 37 CD music collection of band and related projects. Just blew through all of that sort of stuff, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to check the description for links to related videos. And if you enjoyed this, please share it out on social media. Help spread the word that way. I would also appreciate it. All right, have a good day, everyone. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.